Hi folks, this is Gordon Parker from Michigan Tech, and in this video I'm going to show you how to start from scratch with a BeagleBone Blue board and get to the point where you can program it in Simulink and also interact with it via MATLAB. These are pretty nice little boards. They're about $80. They have a decent amount of I/O. You can drive servos with them or even DC motors. Quite a bit of communication capability also without having to add other peripherals to it. So I like to use them for little prototyping jobs, etc. But the interaction with Simulink is pretty amazing. Once you have all this working, you can take pretty much any model that you create in Simulink and deploy it to the board. And that means it could be a real-time simulation or a control system. The whole process of going from the package to this point takes about 30, maybe 40 minutes tops. And I'm going to go through it in great detail and describe for you all the hardware you need and the software, etc. It really isn't that much, but there are a lot of steps, and you have to do them just quite right in order to get it to work properly. In the end, we'll get to the point where you can take a model like this is our test model, and deploy it. And what this does is just takes a little pulse train and gets that signal to one of the BeagleBone's LEDs. So then we should see one of the LEDs flashing right around here on the BeagleBone. Now notice that I also put into this model a transfer function block. And the reason for that was just to illustrate that indeed you can just grab a block from the Simulink library browser and plop it in here and it will deploy properly. To get this to run on the BeagleBone, all we have to do is click this button, and it's going to churn for a little bit. Maybe takes a minute or so to compile and download, and then we'll see the little LED flashing. So what I'm going to do is click this and then skip ahead so we don't have to waste that time. And there's the LED. It's flashing at about once every 2 seconds or so. So let's get started. Well, here's the first step, and that is to make sure that you have all the hardware and software you need. You definitely need a BeagleBone Blue that is, and there's some information on the link shown here. Of course, you need a computer to do this. I'm going to be using a Mac, but you can certainly do it on Windows and I think also Linux too, although I haven't done that myself. And you need the ability to install software. So if you don't have those privileges, make sure that you set it up so that you do. Now, one comment on the computer that you use. If you're using a Mac, I would highly recommend that you don't use a Mac that has Catalina. I've had a lot of trouble with that and basically gave up. So any of the earlier OSs seem to work, but Catalina, not so much. It has to do with the USB interaction and so on. Speaking of USB, you'll need a USB to micro USB cable to get started. You'll also need a micro SD, and I've shown a couple pictures here on the right, and also some way to read/flash them. Now, a lot of computers will have a slot where you can just put in the full-size SD card and use an adapter that typically comes with any micro SD card that you purchase. Or if you don't have one of those slots, you can acquire one of these USB type SD card reader/flasher. And just make sure that the micro SD card that you get is at least 8 gig or greater. Now here's the software that you need. It looks intimidating, but it's not too bad. You'll definitely need some of the MathWorks tools. MATLAB Simulink, MATLAB Coder, Simulink Coder. Because what we're actually using is Simulink Coder, or the BeagleBone support package for Simulink Coder. And that's the second thing on the list that you need. If you have MATLAB and Simulink Coder, then installing the Simulink Coder support package for BeagleBone Blue is free. It'd be great to have some sort of a sample model. And I'm showing one here of a flashing LED, but there are many that you can download for free off the MathWorks site. We need some way to flash the SD card, and in the second item, number 3, I'm going to be using the Balena etcher to do that. It's a free application, works great. And finally, in item number 4, you'll need the proper Debian image. I'm showing one very specific one here that I have found to work very reliably with the Simulink Coder. Here are the 7 steps, and we're going to go through them in this order. I'm not going to drill through them in great detail right now, but suffice it to say that the first thing we're going to do is get the Debian image installed on the micro SD card. The next thing we're going to do is transfer the Debian image to the BeagleBone. And once we're done with that, you won't need the SD card anymore, so you can give it to a friend of yours. After that, we'll test the Debian installation. I put 3 minutes there, but you could spend as much time as you want with that, but we'll just do a very quick test on it. Finally, we're going to, in step 5, install the Simulink Coder package into your installation of MATLAB Simulink. Step number 6 is the place where you might have to have a little bit of patience. We have to connect the BeagleBone to the computer and have MATLAB see it. And once it sees it, we can update the installation on the BeagleBone. This takes a little while, maybe 7 minutes or so. And if you don't have an internet connection that's stable, it can cause some troubles. So make sure that you have a good internet connection and all will be well. And then finally, in step 7 is the fun part. We just get to test to make sure everything's working. Step 1 is to get the Balena etcher and also the Debian image that we're going to need. So here's the site for the Balena etcher. Again, it's free. You could just go in here and install that application. After that, go to the link that I gave you on the software steps, which takes you to the Debian BeagleBoard.org images repository. And you can see that there are a few images to choose from. But the one that you'll want is this one right here. And if you just click on this, you can save it off. So at this point, I have on my computer the image that I'm going to install on the micro SD card and also the installation of the Balena etcher. So now let's go on to etching that pesky little SD card. Here we are at step 2, and now what I'm going to do is take that little SD card that you see there and slide it into the adapter. And since I have a SD card slot on my computer, I just stick that in and we'll get right to the Balena etcher. I just inserted the SD card adapter into the slot in the computer, and I get this little warning message because the computer doesn't quite know what to do with that crazy SD card. So I'm just going to say ignore to this, and then we'll get into the Balena etcher. Alright, so far so good. Now I'm going to select Flash from File and pick the Debian image that we just downloaded. Great. And I'm good to go. All I have to do is hit the Flash button. And this will take a little bit of time to complete the process. Wonderful. Now we're done. And again, I get this little warning message because the computer doesn't quite know what to do with this type of a file. So I'll just say eject. Here we are at step 3, and now we're going to finally apply some power to the BeagleBone. What you can see here is the BeagleBone completely powered off. I have one end of the USB to micro USB cord plugged into the BeagleBone, and the other end is just dangling. And you can also see the little micro SD card. What we're going to do is stick the micro SD card right into here. If you flip the board over, you'll see the little slot perhaps a little bit better, but you just put the card into there and then plug in the BeagleBone. But there's one little detail that's really important. Before you apply the power, you want to push down on the little SD card boot button right here. So let me do this to illustrate. So I'm holding that down and plugging in. Now I'm going to keep holding this down for just a little bit until I see some of those lights flashing. And now I'm going to release. And what we'll see is the BeagleBone start to boot, and it's going to force it to boot off the SD card and flash that OS onto the BeagleBone. And we'll know it's flashing because those blue lights right here will form this particular pattern. They sort of go right to left, right to left. It's referred to as the Larson scanner. And there it goes. And now it's going to do this for quite a while as it's flashing from the SD card onto the essentially USB-like memory on the BeagleBone. When it's done with this, the BeagleBone will completely shut off. All the lights will go out, it'll go dark, and that's when you know it's done. It's done with the Larson scanner, and it'll start shutting down any second now. There it goes. So at this point, we no longer need the micro SD card. So you can pop it out and never use it again. So now it's time to test the installation. There's not a whole lot we're going to do with this test. We could do quite a bit, but I'm just going to make sure that we can boot it up and ping it. So to do that, I'm going to pull out the USB cable that was poked into my computer and plug it back in so that I can apply power to this thing and get it going again. Now it's important that you take the SD card out at this point, otherwise you could end up going through that whole Larson scanner flashing business. So don't forget to do that. Now one fun thing you can do at this point is connect to it wirelessly. And that's also one way that you know that the BeagleBone has booted. So if I go up here to my networks, I can see that I actually have a BeagleBone SharePoint here. And I could just connect to that, and instead of using the USB cable to communicate with it, I could just do it over that SharePoint. You still have to apply power to this thing, and there's a lot of different ways you can do that. And one way is to use a LiPo battery right here. So let's see if we can talk to it. There's a couple ways you could do it. You could use a shell or a terminal window, but we'll do it through a web browser. And the way that we'll do it is we'll just go to the BeagleBone's address, and on a Mac that's 192.168.6.2. On a PC it would be 192.168.7.2. And then you use :3000 to fire up a little web IDE for the BeagleBone. And there it is, Cloud 9. And in a second it'll bring up a terminal window where you could issue commands to the BeagleBone. But this is all I really need to do. At this point, I know that the installation has taken, and I can talk to this thing. So for instance, I could do ls, and there's all the files on the BeagleBone. So at this point, we're done with step 4. It's time to move on to step 5, where we do some more flashing of the BeagleBone, but this time with the Simulink Coder package for the BeagleBone. So I'm going to leave the BeagleBone in the state it's in. It's powered up, it's booted, I know everything's working, and I'm just going to fire up MATLAB. And in this case, I'm using MATLAB 2020A. And let's go to the add-ons, and we'll say get add-ons. I'll type in BeagleBone Blue. And this is the one we want. Now here it says it's installed because obviously I've already installed it. So I really don't want to uninstall it, but you can imagine that if you click on this, it will take you to an installation page. And just go ahead and install this package. Now because it's already installed, all I need to do is manage it, but I'll show you how to do that as if you had already installed it. So if I go to add-ons and now just say manage add-ons. And this is the one I want to manage, the BeagleBone Blue, and I'll click on this little settings or gear icon. And here we go. This is going to walk us through several steps. It takes maybe 5 to 7 minutes to complete. And make sure that you have a good internet connection when you do this. Notice right now the BeagleBone has a few blue lights on. Other than that, not much going on. As soon as we get started with this, one of the first things that MATLAB is going to do is start up the Wi-Fi on the BeagleBone. And when that happens, you're going to see a very bright green light come on the BeagleBone. And that will be on for the rest of the time that you use the BeagleBone. So let's go to next. Reading through these is probably a good idea before you start clicking anything. So we do have USB drivers installed on the computer, so I can say next. And it's now asking if we want to customize the installation. Definitely say yes to this. So here, MATLAB is trying to talk to the BeagleBone, making sure that it has connectivity. If it didn't have connectivity, it would have failed at that point. Now what we want to do is check the compatibility of the image that we installed on the BeagleBone a few minutes ago. Success. So we'll go to next. You definitely want to be on a Wi-Fi network to do the remainder of the installation. So we'll scan and pick a network. Next. And to connect to the network, I have to give it the password. Next. We should see the green light come on. We did. It's all good. You know, it went off for a second, but now it'll stay on forever. Let's test the Wi-Fi connection. Good. Next. And now for the fun part. So this is where things slow down a little bit, especially the first couple steps take several minutes, maybe 5-6 minutes. So I'm going to hit start, and it's going to cycle through these and put a check mark by each one as it finishes. And when it's done, it's done. You're ready to go at that point. And there we go, it's all done. So now we can go back to where we started this whole thing and check the example. So I'll click next. I don't want to use any of the canned examples, we'll just use one of our own. And finish. So here we are in a folder called BB Test, and in it we have a model called BB Blue Test. And this is the exact same model that we looked at the beginning of this video with the flashing green light and the little transfer function. Now I know that you don't necessarily have this example, but you can find many examples on the MathWorks website of a little model that you can test at this point. But just to show that everything worked on this installation from scratch, let me go ahead and run this, and hopefully we'll see the little green light blink away. And there it goes. It's blinking again at about a 2-second period. So there you have it. We started from a raw BeagleBone and a raw SD card and went all the way to the proper installation so that we can talk to this thing and program it through Simulink. So now that we have the light to flash, let's look at how to stop it. There's lots of commands that you can issue through the MATLAB command window to interact with the BeagleBone while it's running and while it's not running. And we'll just look at a couple of those here. I have some other videos where I'll introduce those in more detail. Here's our command window. The first thing I need to do is to create a variable that's associated with the BeagleBone Blue board. And to do that, I'll go like this. And there we go. Now what I'll do is check to see if the model is actually running. I mean, I know it is because I can see the LED, but let's do it at the command line. Because it returned a 1, it's definitely running. So now let's go ahead and stop the BeagleBone. And I'm going to time this so that I stop it when the green light is off. That way I won't have the green light stuck on forever. Boom, just hit enter, and I was able to stop it. And I can check that just by having a look at the is model running again. And now it returns 0. A couple other comments about the BeagleBone. There are 2 passwords associated with it that you might want to know. One of them is the word temppwd. That's the default password for the Debian installation that you put on the BeagleBone. So that's temppwd, of course all one word. The other password that is useful is for the SharePoint. So if you were to connect to the BeagleBone wirelessly, you would need a different password. And that is just BeagleBone, where the 2 B's are capitalized. So capital B, Eagle, capital B, own. So BeagleBone, 2 capital B's. Those are about the only 2 passwords you need to know, and you can find all that information on the beaglebone.org website. I hope this helps. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.